All right, race and gender front and center for 2020 Democratic contenders, with some frontrunners forced to talk about their white privilege.
I do think it's simply harder for candidates of color or for female candidates.
Some people have said, you know, the reason you get so much media coverage is not unlike Joe Biden or Bernie Sanders. You know, some people say you're benefiting from white male privilege, where the media wants to cover you, and candidates who maybe would be of different skin colors wouldn't get the same level of coverage.
I'd like to believe it's my qualities and my message. I do think it's simply harder for candidates of color or for female candidates, and I'm very mindful of that.
Okay, that is 2020 breakout star, Democratic Mayor Pete Buttigieg, reflecting on race and gender and the impact of white male privilege, what it may have impacted his presidential campaign. So let's debate this point with Fox News contributor Richard Fowler and New York Times bestselling author Eric Metaxas. Great to have you both with us.
Good to be here, Shannon.
Okay, Richard, I'm going to start with you because this is the most diverse field the Democrats have ever had, and yet in all of the polling until today, it was 3 white dudes at the top. Now, today, Senator Elizabeth Warren is also cracking into the top 4, but with 3 other white dudes. What do you make of this?
It's a very interesting poll, and I think what you also find in the poll that was done by another network is when you read down into it, it talks about who do you want to hear more from. When those voters are asked, the 2 candidates that rise to the top by substantial numbers is Senator Kamala Harris and Senator Elizabeth Warren, even though Bernie, Biden and then Elizabeth Warren are the top 3 candidates. They want to hear more from Elizabeth Warren. They want to hear more from Kamala Harris. So it speaks to the fact that the Democratic field is looking to hear more from women and more from people of color, and the media continues to cover Biden, Bernie, Beto, Buttigieg.
The killer bees, as we've started calling them.
Yes. And to what Richard has just said and to what Mayor Pete has just said, I say poppycock. I think it's nonsense. The reason the media went insane over Obama may have had something to do with the fact that he was black. And the only reason anybody is paying any attention to Pete Buttigieg is because he's gay. He dresses like a straight insurance salesman, which is a positive. He's safe, he's articulate, he's clean, well-spoken. But
as you're alluding to Biden there.
Yes, I am.
Comments.
Thank you for annotating my comments.
Yeah.
But the idea that that's not, why are we paying attention? He's 2 years older than Justin Bieber. He's gay, and he is the mayor of a tiny little city, South Bend, Indiana. So it's comical that we have to pretend that that's a downside. That's an upside. If you're gay, if you're exotically ethnic, if you are, if you're black, if you're a woman, people are all over that in the Democratic Party.
But
so it's
not
comical.
At the topping of the polls.
The only reason for that is because people are scared to death. They're trying to look for somebody who can win, and they see Biden as somehow centrist. They see Bernie as last time he would have won if Hillary hadn't colluded against him. So I think that that's a big piece of it.
Well,
I'm not sure if that's. I think you have not the right analysis of the field. I think if you look at this field very carefully, I think what Biden is benefiting from is a couple things. I think the first thing that Biden benefits from is his name ID, and I think the second thing that Biden benefits from is the fact that a lot of folks in the Democratic Party, whether it's African American voters in South Carolina or whether it's old disaffected auto workers in Michigan, they see Biden as this sort of hometown hero type of guy, and I think that's why he's #1 in the polls. I think for the Bernie folks, Bernie had a base going into this election, which is why he's come out so far ahead in the polls. He had folks from 2016 and beyond that. He has spent this past 3 or 4 years building this base of people. He never stopped running, and I think that's why these 2 candidates are at the top and no other reason.
But I actually agree with what Richard just said. But he left out that they both have slippy dentures.
Okay, well, I don't know about the denture vote. I don't know. Adhesives, what's happening there? Okay, but in the meantime, I want to talk about Bernie Sanders and something the senator has tweeted out. Because, of course, Avengers broke all box office records. I didn't see it, but I heard it was amazing and awesome. He says, what would be truly heroic is if Disney used its profits from Avengers to pay all of its workers a middle-class wage instead of paying its CEO, Bob Iger, $65.6 million, over 1,400 times as much as the average worker at Disney makes. I mean, Eric, this resonated with people last time around, this whole populist notion.
Well, look, it's called socialism, and in the same way that Pete Buttigieg is trying to redefine Christianity by throwing away whatever 3,000 years of a sexual ethic that's existed. The Democrats are also trying to redefine this idea of what used to be considered stealing is now considered socialism. Like, is populist. I think most people in America know that a free market system that is not crony capitalism is going to help the poor and the middle class. If it is not corrupt, and if the people in it are somewhat virtuous, and if we're speaking about a culture of virtue, what Bernie Sanders is talking about has never worked, won't work, and Disney would fall apart if they, took it too seriously.
But Richard, I mean, the younger generation especially, they're warming up more and more to this idea of quote-unquote socialism.
I don't think the ideal is socialist, but I think there's something to be said. And I'm not on Disney's board of directors. I don't control Disney, and I think Disney should have the free will to do what they would like to do. But it is pretty alarming that the CEO of the company makes 14 times more than not 1,400 times more than not the lowest wage person, but the average wage person at the company. And that is problematic, and that is why there's...
Why?
That's problematic because
Why
that's an insane number.
You say it's insane, but there are
and the majority of Americans that feel it's insane.
But you know what? Disney is not about the majority of Americans. Disney is owned by shareholders.
Including Walt Disney's daughter.
Well, and
Disney is owned by shareholders.
She has said something, but part of this, too, we have to remind people, is because of a sale that generated hundreds of millions of dollars, and this was part of the bonus structure.
Very true, very true. I think there's a lot, even if this economy is doing well, and you've got to give Trump credit for the fact the economy is doing well, one of the problems that we do have in this economy is income inequality.
All right, we got to leave it there. Just pause, because we'll continue this during the commercial if you don't go anywhere.